to Lindsay's point about making sure that the vast majority of their time is spent living their life's mission, so that people stop living small and start really living big, start doing big things, because everybody has the capability to do that. And I think that's why I chose these four to ride along with me, because they all have either done big things already or about ready to grow and do new things that are even far bigger than anything that they've done before.
Yeah,
and that's
certainly.
great.
Awesome. All right, welcome back everybody to Mornings with Millennials. We've got Michael Seaver here with us today. Michael, thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And thank you everybody for coming out and joining us here. Another beautiful morning in Phoenix. So, Michael, it'd be great to just hear a little bit about your business and the services that you all provide.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. You know, it's been an interesting journey for me over the last 5 years since I first started my business. Trying to get to the point of where I am now. So basically for me, I have three basic lines of revenue. I do three basic things. And so the first is public speaking. So I travel around the nation and speak publicly about a wide variety of topics that have to do with leadership development or executive coaching or personal branding. Many topics around communication or executive presence. It's been a good thing for me to have those opportunities to go around and help people on a national level or scale. Second thing that I do is it's a lot of executive coaching. So working with individuals one-to-one to help them really truly identify what their life's mission is, help them set very specific goals, and then work with them to make sure that they know exactly what their executive brand is. So we work for sometimes 3, 6, or 12 months to set up what those statements are, and then what are they going to do to adjust and amend stuff in their life to make sure that they're moving towards that. And probably most of my revenue, most of my time is spent leadership consulting. So I'll work with executive teams and corporations, giving them things like the DISC assessments, and then giving them multiple types of training, and then working with their executives really hand in hand for 3, 6, or 12 months to make sure that the things we're trying to do to adjust and change culture are actually being implemented effectively, well, and efficiently. So for the last couple of years, I've been able to do it full time. Thankfully, the business has been growing. My speaking schedule is pretty booked for the next 9 months, so I'm very, very thankful for that. So getting to the point of being able to really, truly help individuals at a really deep level is something that I know that each of these folks in the backseat know about me, and really could say that it's really true to me and really something I care about.
Great.
So I'm very thankful for the chances to do that.
Yeah, sounds phenomenal. I'm curious, so just not to dive in on one thing too particularly, but you mentioned DISC assessments. I don't think anybody we've had on the show has mentioned that before, and our audience might not quite know what that is. Would you mind speaking to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the DISC assessment is something that was actually developed in the late 1920s, and has been kind of grown and developed obviously since then. So the company that I use is actually based here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and they've administered the DISC assessment to over 25 million people globally in over 140 different countries. So what the particular assessment is it actually just looks at 4 major factors, right? It looks at how do you make decisions, how do you persuade or influence people, how do you deal with pace and consistency or steadiness in your day, and do you like to follow rules or do you not like to follow rules? So my work with that particular assessment is really helping people to understand what is their preference in terms of communication or behavioral profile, but also then looking at what are different fears that they might have as a result of that, or what are their default emotions when they get under stress. So I can deep dive with an individual to really help him or her get to the place of feeling comfortable with who they are, their preferences for behavior, and be coming up with strategies to help them overcome any fears that they may have. Okay, so in addition to the DISC profile itself, I use something called the 12 driving forces, which I'm also certified in. And it is really looking at human motivators, right? And how is it that we know the communication aspect or piece, but the motivators piece more looks at the why we do what we do.
Okay.
And if you follow Simon Sinek at all, right, he's a big fan of starting with why.
Yeah.
So my work often becomes figuring out what's the natural behavioral profile, but also pairing that with what motivates the person, coming up with really truly how do we get them to spend their time, 100% of their time, doing the work that they actually care about the most.
Okay.
Right? Because they can communicate and behave and be motivated by the work, so they'll be able to get a lot more done.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, and so I think a lot of the audience out there are kind of in that millennial range, and might not be able to go out and find somebody like yourself as an executive coach, right? What's maybe a piece of advice you could give to them when it comes to trying to, find themselves, figure out the goals, and set up some of those goals for them to be able to go out and accomplish?
Yeah, there's thankfully through the internet and a lot of different resources, there are versions and different things that are similar to the disc that are available for free online.
Okay.
So you can find similar personality profiles and assessments available online. So those are available and out there. So anybody is welcome to take them. I think probably one of the biggest things, and I'm a big learner. I'm a very, very a big proponent of continual learning. So I would encourage anybody that is considering self-development and trying to understand self is to really look at it experiences, right? So experiential learning. So if there's anything that somebody is really truly interested in or passionate about, is trying to create as many experiences in those places as possible, to have as many feelings and emotions and just be in kind of a flow state to really thoroughly enjoy that time, to see would this be something I would want to do for a long period of time moving forward.
Right.
Okay. So there's a little bit of a formula that we can utilize as we think about this. So basically, right around age 28 or 30, humans end up going through a little bit of an early life crisis or a quarter life crisis. And then it also happens again when persons turn 48 or 50 as they have kind of that midlife crisis.
Right.
So during the quarter life crisis, what we're really looking for is to say, all right, so from roughly age 15 until about age 30, what were some of the recurring challenges that you experienced or went through? And can you see a pattern in those challenges? And what was the thing that made you really upset or angry, things that you really wanted to do right by the world with or for? So if you can say, this is the cause that I'm really passionate about, and this is the thing that I really would like help with or be able to help somebody else with, likely you can then find a way to find the right philanthropic group or find some sort of a professional association or find the right job, doing any of those things to give back to those people that you would want to help or that you had those challenges with yourself. Right. So if you can find that alignment, having those experiential learning opportunities, and you can help other people overcome challenges that you might have had when you were younger, I think that's really important. So probably one of the easiest ways to say it is just simply to be the person that you needed when you were younger. And it's really that simple, but I don't think that we do a really great job in our society of finding a way to just simply be the person that you needed when you were younger. Yeah, so I wish we did.
I was going to say, I think that's true, especially I know a lot of the friends I've spoken with and people that have gone out, not just started their own companies, but have also gone into the workforce and Fortune 500 companies. I think they often find themselves at a kind of crossroads where they're not quite sure if what they're doing is something they like long term, or they found themselves there because it was something their parents wanted them to do, and now they're having kind of a internal conflict around that. And so focusing on that, how to identify self, is something that's very tough. Yeah, it is difficult. Okay.
So it's a very important process. I don't think that we spend enough time on.
Yeah.
How many times does a person go to the gym in a week, right, to work on their physical self, but they don't spend that same amount of time working on maybe their mental or emotional health.
Yeah.
And that's what I think would be really important. One of my guests back there, Lindsay, is a yoga instructor, and I just think the way that she goes about life and taking time for that kind of mental preparation and being still and being there is really important, and we could do a lot better by that in our society. But we just haven't yet created the right place for that to happen, because we're told you have to go to a specific university, you have to follow in your parents' footsteps. And I think, thankfully, the millennial generation is really pushing against that, and they're doing a tremendous job of saying, well, let's really do something that's in alignment with your life's mission, not in alignment with a specific corporation mission or something that your parents may have done. Right. Yeah. So back in May of this past year, so May 2016, I published a white paper that essentially how does an organization of finance professionals, how does a baby boomer CFO, how does he or she transfer knowledge down to a young millennial finance talent, right? And what does that look like? And so through all the research and all the interviews that I had done around the nation, what we really came back with was that the millennial generation, they are nonconformists, right, when it comes to things that have come before them. They do have a slightly different level of anxiety, or a slightly deeper level of anxiety than previous generations. And they do have higher expectations in a way that they want to be able to live their life's work and do meaningful things. They do have a desire for what's called a personalized career. So they are more interested in continual learning opportunities within a corporation or in extracurricular things that maybe parents hadn't necessarily involved with quite as much. So it is a very interesting thing. So most of the time when I'm making recommendations to baby boomers or folks who are more experienced in the workplace, it's about three basic things, right? It's about providing, number one, mentorship to a millennial and giving that millennial an opportunity to reverse mentor somebody who's higher up the chain, because that's a very critical piece. Number two is that it's important that they provide continual feedback. So some sort of a CFO person or a controller would want to provide feedback very, very regularly to the millennial to make sure that he or she feels the growth and development and is continuing to move into what they want, right? And third is that they really want continual learning opportunities, right? So that could happen a wide variety of ways. It could happen in a university setting. It could happen through an online class that's free. It could happen through things that are happening at the corporate office, right? It could happen mainly through the one-to-one mentorship. So there's so many paths by which it happens, but it's a matter of being conscious and creating the structures and systems to allow for those things to happen.
I love the idea of reverse mentorship as well. I think, especially this day and age, there can be a lot of the mentality of you're younger than me, you need to listen to me, or the you're older than me, I know more than you about X, Y, or Z, you need to listen to me, rather than the hey, look, we both bring things to the table. Let's work together on how we can use your experience in the industry for 30 years and my understanding of technology to make the business better. And I know that's one thing that I've spoken to a few friends about who have gotten frustrated in some of these corporate environments. Like, well, take a step back. Getting angry about it and going internal is not going to help anybody. How can we work together on that? On those types of things, definitely important to move the business forward. So, now you mentioned that was a white paper. Where could people potentially find that?
So the white paper was actually published in partnership with something called the Financial Executives Research Foundation, which is based in New Jersey. And then the major sponsor was Robert Half, large accounting staffing organization internationally. So either the Financial Executives Research Foundation website, it's there. Robert Half has an entire page set up and devoted to it. And anybody can visit my website, which is michaelseaver.com, and it'll be on the About page. So any of those three pages, they're able to download and get access to it.
And if you're comfortable with it, for those watching on YouTube, I'll link that in the description if that sounds good.
That would be great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Did I say anything that you guys want me to speak about more?
I just like the fact of trying to figure out the coordination between millennial generation and the more established generation. And in that, because I find that challenge a lot. How do we...
Let's maybe do this really quick, if you don't mind. Let's get this thing just set up very generally.
My name is Paul Evans. I'm a CPA, and I own a CPA firm called Evans CPA Consulting. I do CFO outsourcing work and consult with companies on various things, acquisitions and dispositions, and all sorts of other different things in that financial accounting and finance area. And one thing I find in my business a lot with the newer generation coming in is there's a lot of ideas for innovation and how do we do it better. And I'm one that's all for innovation and how do we do it better, but also keeping track of those things that have been kind of time tested and what a young person might call it an old way to do things. But I wonder if there's that way. And I believe there's an opportunity to merge those two things. And I think that both parties, both sides need to keep open to those things, but that new way to do things may not be the best way to do things. And at the end of the day, we have to ask why. Why are we doing what we're doing, and is it accomplishing the goal? what challenges do you have in getting these teams to work together, and how do you work those out and kind of communicate that message in a way that sticks?
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. That's a great question. So it is really, really difficult when you consider 4 or 5 different generations that are in the workplace together, and they all have very, very drastically different approaches to the way they go about doing business. And then you layer on top of that the different communication or behavioral profiles we already referenced right in our conversation. So it can be very difficult. So the very first part that I'm always looking at with an organization is, how does any potential change align with the organization's mission? So we always have to be starting with why and figuring out, how does this particular thing start and kind of drive the organization's mission? How does this fit into the fulfillment of that mission? So always want to make sure that happens. Second thing is that I want to make sure that the structures or the organizational processes are in place to allow for that change to happen smoothly. And I use a multitude of systems and processes to make sure that the change happens with as little emotional baggage as possible, because it can happen pretty quickly. And so another thing that I'm very focused on, and I've done this within multiple organizations, is I've created essentially cross-functional innovation teams. So if the C-suite comes up with some sort of an idea and says, hey, we're going to make this adjustment, and they just push it down, the likelihood of anybody else in the organization adopting it's going to be very small. But if there's a cross-functional team of people within the organization that are coming up with ideas and submitting them to the C-suite or some sort of a change control committee, it's a heck of a lot simpler for that committee to say, hey, we would like to implement this particular idea. And then everybody within the organization will see that their input is being heard, they're being engaged, and that somehow then they can see those changes happen. So then the change has been accepted. Now how do you go through the process of actually implementing that change? So I can use a different process about moving a person who is potentially skeptical with change to a place of being neutral or being okay with whatever that change might be, and moving them to a place of being on board, like being really, really ready to accept that. So can you start it with why, right? Can you then figure out a way to get the right systems in place to allow for change to just be a part of everyday culture, and then do you message and communicate it appropriately down to the folks who have to do the implementation? That's a great question.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Maybe let's have a fun question.
Well, who else has a question back there?
Look at those two back.
I have one, but I'm...
Bruce is like going to drill me with it.
Or do you need one first?
Go ahead.
Bruce, you got this.
All right.
Right there,
Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Bruce Weber. I own a company, Greater Boards, and my company helps organizations understand how to harness the power of the leadership they have within a board of directors or a board of trustees, and use that to advance the mission of the organization, whether it be a for-profit or non-profit organization. I'm always intrigued by success. That word is just sort of a very broad term that everybody uses, and we want to be successful. So I'm curious, Michael, so when somebody's really thinking about their life, when they're thinking about success, so what might be 3 things they might want to do to help set them up for a successful career and a successful life?
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. That's a great question as well. So I'm a big fan of Harvard Medical School. They've been doing something called the Harvard Study of Adult Development for the last 80 plus years. And so back in the late 1930s, what they decided to do was track one of the graduating classes from Harvard, at the same time as tracking a group of boys from one of Boston's poorest neighborhoods. And so every 2 years, they've been keeping an eye on each of these respective groups from a physiological standpoint to a relationship and engagement standpoint with family and friends to wealth production, right? They've been tracking them on a lot of different socioeconomic indicators. And so for 75 plus years, they've been trying to assess and figure out what is it that actually leads to a long, happy, and healthy life. And so as I've been following their work and really thinking about success, most of the time we tend to think, or humans tend to think, that success is somehow power or money or fame or something tangible. But of course, Harvard, right, which is this kind of like this West Point of capitalism, right? Most of the stuff that's come out of Harvard has been very much in support of wealth production and things associated with it. What this study found was that the number one determinant of a long, happy, and healthy life was not power, money, fame, success. It was the quality and depth of your relationships. It was really that simple. So person watching this video, when we think about what does success mean, first and foremost, always go back to the quality and the depth of your relationships with your family and friends. So first and foremost, that would be the thing that I would want to focus on, and to make sure that you have that there. Number two, for me, success, or something to consider, I think, is this idea of what percent of your day do you spend living your life's mission, right? So if you've set that mission statement for yourself and you say, this is what I'm going to do, the bigger percentage of your time spent doing that particular thing, to me, is success, because you're engaged, you're happy in doing that thing. And I would also really, I think humans have a very, very distinct desire to learn continually. So success would be creating an opportunity to be in a place where you can learn experientially, or via a book, or via something online. So do you have great quality relationships, right? You know, do you have your life's mission aligned, and do you spend your time doing those things meaningfully? And are you finding ways to learn continually? And if you do that, you know, to me, that is going to lead to a pretty darn good life.
Awesome. I like that. Yeah.
Scott, we've lost this camera.
Is that looking?
Yeah,
Is that working? Awesome,
Well,
ladies.
Bruce, that was a great question.
Yeah.
And great answer. I think, again, that's one of those things that a lot of people just get caught up in, is like, what is success?
Yep.
And trying to define that and everything.
It's hard, because I think we do want to default back to what our society says is success, or what our parents say is success, and you have to take those things into consideration, but it's not everything.
Definitely. Awesome. Ladies.
Alright. My name is Sarah Mayer, and I'm the Director of Operations for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. I have 5 chapters in the Southwest. And my question is, we've heard a lot about millennials being very cause-oriented. And as a person who is working for an organization that's trying to find a cure for blood cancer, which is a huge cause, how do you keep people motivated for something that's going to take billions of dollars and many, many years over time, so that they want to continue to participate?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. That's a great question, and kind of a tough one, right? So there's been a ton of research from authors and psychologists and PhDs kind of looking at the psychology of humans in general, right? And how is it that we help them? How is it that we move them from point A to point B? And so Dan Ariely wrote a book called Predictably Irrational. Another author, Daniel Kahneman, wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And through all of these great research studies and all this great work, what we found is that humans are essentially 2 things. Number one, they're wildly irrational, right? So they do a lot of things that you wouldn't expect them to do, or the thing that's actually the better route they don't take. And number 2 is that they're very, very emotional beings, although our society does a lot to kind of suppress and repress those emotions.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about a younger generation, a Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, and trying to find ways to engage them over the long term, it's really going deep to that specific person's experiences, and trying to do a lot of the things that I think Brene Brown wrote about in Daring Greatly, which was allowing them to be vulnerable and really share their life's experiences and share their story and share their journey. So if we can get a potential donor or a millennial or anybody that wants to engage, and get him or her to open up about his or her life's experiences and really share them, now we know how we can engage them in our particular organization's cause, right? So Sarah and I have talked at length about my father back in 1995 being diagnosed with hairy cell leukemia, right? So thankfully, after 38 days in the hospital, he was able to make it through, and he's still in remission, still doing great. But I feel a closer relationship to Sarah because of the work that she does, but also because of her brother's story. So I'm always, and because her brother passed away from leukemia as well. So because I was willing to be vulnerable with her, she was willing to be vulnerable with me. Now that we have that little bit of a bond of a family member going through something like that, it's a lot simpler for us to stay in touch and to understand our experiences, our emotions, what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So if we can engage young people in being a little bit more vulnerable and telling the story, it's a lot easier to then get them engaged and involved with the cause we're trying to support.
Certainly. Okay. Great question.
That was a good one.
One thing I'd like to bring up too, just kind of on an aside to that though, I'm curious to get your thoughts on, in in the various companies I've run, one thing I've always enjoyed doing is saying, hey, you know, every year up to $500 if you donate it to a cause of your choice, you know, we will match a donation to that cause.
Right.
Is that something you think more companies should maybe look at, or?
Yeah, that's great. So,
Because it kind of amazed me that when I talk to, again, friends and even executives in some of these bigger companies that could easily afford, you know, a $250 or $500 donation match,
yep.
nobody's really doing that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, great point. So Bruce actually has some really significant data, the things that he's been doing to kind of look at and research how much money is given annually. And I think, Bruce, the number was 370-ish million?
$73 billion.
Yep. Is given. Okay. So how much comes from individual donors versus corporations?
270 billion.
Okay.
Wow.
So, all right.
US-wide.
So to your question, right? So if 370 billion is available, but 270 is coming from the individual, if there's a way for the corporation or the organization to say, yes, we are going to match, and it's going to be in your name, Mr. and Mrs. Employee, then it's going to start to tap into and start to create that reciprocity to make sure that that employee feels good that the organization is supporting him or her in support of that philanthropic cause.
Exactly.
Because in America, right, there's plenty of money that's being disseminated and distributed. Now it's a matter, again, of getting down to how can the corporation support that specific employee's initiatives directly.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the white paper, it's called Creating a Leadership Pipeline. The kind of the core of it is something called mass customization. So if organizations do a great job of creating essentially an a la carte menu of different things that they can engage in, that the millennial or even the Gen Z person is going to be far more likely to want to pick and choose different things out of the a la carte menu, and that will further engage that employee more deeply.
Definitely. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, great to hear.
Very good.
It is. While it's working, I'm going to suggest we get in the final question just to be safe, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, we can turn around and go back.
What I think we're actually going to end up doing is just a giant loop.
Okay, that's fine. That's
Just
good.
FYI.
That's good. Okay, so we good? Mine's still blinking. We're good.
Yep, we're all good.
Okay, you're up.
Okay. My name is Lindsay Smith, and by day I work as the Director of Client Services for a software company, and by night I teach yoga. As Michael mentioned, recently launched off a new business that I call Be Still Yoga, where I really encourage people to literally be still, to take a moment and turn inward and focus a bit on, you know, some of those things that he talked about, emotional health, spiritual health, and coming into a little bit more of alignment with your mind, body, and soul. So we talked a bit about, you know, life missions, and I think having a life mission written down is really important because it helps you to do things like prioritize your time. We only have so many hours every week. You can take a glance at that. You know, if you're being asked to do something, you know, does this go in alignment with my mission? If someone doesn't have a life mission or they're trying to work on theirs, what kind of steps can they take in order to begin crafting their life's mission?
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Lindsay. So the crafting of a life's mission, at least for me, when I'm facilitating a person's development through it, is a multi-step process. So first and foremost, I do administer the talent insights, which is the DISC and the motivators piece that I referenced earlier. So they definitely do take that assessment, and that is a good first way for a person to be able to see him or herself in black and white, to know preferences and communication and behavioral profiles, to know what motivates them, and to really then begin to think about how do they distribute their time in a day, right? So first and foremost, take the personality assessment so that we know that. And then what I do with my clients is I put them through a multi-step process, asking them questions about their past, the things that they had done leading up until our conversation. I then ask them a series of questions essentially to benchmark where they're at today in the present. And then based on that and some of the data that comes out of that, I will then ask them questions about their future and their goals. So if 3 to 5 years from now, what do you want to do? Where is it that you want to go? So that we can create a little bit of a gap between the current benchmark and what it is that they want to drive to. So if we've done the talent insights assessment or similar, and we've asked the past, present, and future questions, now I've got enough material to be able to find patterns of information and data about that individual And based on those patterns, we then begin to start to write those guiding statements that I referenced earlier, the mission, the goals, and the personal brand statement. And I think as you really think about what does a person's mission come to, I referenced it just a little bit ago, but it was this idea that at some point historically in your life, there has been something that has bothered you. There's been a series of challenges. There has been something that you've seen on the television or online that has bothered you that you wanted to give back to or fix or create something. And so helping an individual understand what were those challenges, what were those recurring problems or patterns of information that they've seen, and finding ways to help them essentially be the person that they needed when they were younger. So once we've gone through that process, looked at the assessment results, asked the questions, written those guiding statements, we then begin to make adjustments in that person's life, and then we can start to figure out how to redistribute their time, to Lindsay's point about making sure that the vast majority of their time is spent living their life's mission, so that people stop living small and start really living big, start doing big things, because everybody has the capability to do that. And I think that's why I chose these 4 to ride along with me, because they all have either done big things already or about ready to grow and do new things that are even far bigger than anything that they've done before. And that's great.